Want to watch football without the restrictions of blackouts or cable? Check out expressvpn.com to help you get access to all the live games. Sign up today using the link in the description to get 3 free months. Yo to Boat fam, it's the Director, Chargers fan. So this morning I wake up like every day, right? Dewy-eyed, counting down the days to Chargers kickoff. And I take a look at my watch. I'm like, you know what? We're actually kind of getting close to training camp. Be it about a month, I know, but it kind of gave me the jitters, right? The excitement, like the real level hype starting to build that the Charger season is just around the corner. And that kind of gave me an idea of what I want to talk about in today's video. I kind of want to get a leg up, pun intended, on the camp battles topic, because I do think there's some fun narratives to follow this season. For example, right, honorable mention going to the kicking battle in training camp, or I should say mini camp right now, OTAs, right? Cameron Dicker, Dustin Hopkins, one of the heroes from last season. These guys have been pretty neck and neck during the offseason. Who are the Chargers going to go with? Well, I pretty strongly think they're going to be going with Cameron Dicker, but still, kind of exciting to see these guys go head-to-head. I have a whole bunch of positions where I think teams, or I should say players, are going to be fighting for snaps, fighting, for starting positions, higher on the depth chart, as well as maybe even their jobs. So it should be a pretty fun one. The offseason, this is kind of what it's all about before you actually get into the preseason and regular season games. How's the team shaping up? What's the coaching doing in order to improve the roster? And who's going to win out the battles, be it talent, hard work, etc., etc. So it should be a good time today. Before we do get started, guys, let's hit up the sponsor. Why don't we? Right? Underdog Fantasy. If you guys want to get in on the best fantasy platform on the web, one of the most exciting things I got when I was running this channel was an email from these guys saying, "Hey, Director, you want to work with us?" I was like, "Heck yeah, I do. I've been using Underdog already for months." Use code Director to match your first deposit up to $100. Get in on the action. It's a great way to support the channel while also having some fun along the way. Before we do get started on the camp battles video, guys, I'm pretty excited about this one. Hit us up with a like and sub if you do enjoy this Chargers content. Small amount of time you guys take to hit the like, sub, and bell notification helps me out a lot. Let's get into it, baby. Lights, camera, action. My top 5 Chargers camp battles to look forward to in the 2023 off season. Should be a pretty good one today. Now, I know we kind of skimmed over this last one during the opener. Just kind of close my thoughts out on that. I think a lot of Chargers fans know where we stand with this. Cameron Dicker came in, mid-season after the injury to Dustin Hopkins. I think he was on his way home or trying to go to an Adele concert or something like that. The guy comes off the streets, becomes the hero for the Chargers in terms of kicker. If you guys don't remember, years back, my God, we had some problems with kicker for a very long time. Now we got a couple of guys in the offseason that are pretty neck and neck. I think they've been honestly just killing it during OTAs and minicamp. I think at this point, the Chargers got 2 really good ones. But again, if I were to be honest, I think the Chargers, they're going to try and get younger, and I think that's why Cameron Dicker's going to win the job there. But still, not a bad problem to have if you're the Chargers. I do have also one more honorable mention before we get into some of the bigger names that you guys are going to recognize that I do think is going to be a very interesting match to see unfold, especially with the new rule that's been taking place, or at least voted in by the NFL this last offseason. That's going to be the Chargers battle at backup quarterback. Of course, the Chargers drafting Max Duggan, which, of course, you guys will remember the Director wasn't a huge fan of during that draft. I felt like maybe there's other players I wanted, but mostly I was feeling I don't want to give up another roster spot to a quarterback 3 like we've been doing the past couple of seasons with Easton Stick and Chase Daniel. Well, fortunately for us, that's not going to be the case. The Chargers voted in a new rule where a backup quarterback 3, an emergency quarterback, would not be taking up a roster spot on the 53. So that's a pretty good deal right there. So that being the case, I'm not as upset at the Max Duggan pick. And from what I'm looking at and what I'm reading, he's having a pretty solid offseason so far. Of course, the Chargers did just re-sign Easton Stick. I'm sure they had, plans to make him the Chargers backup quarterback going forward. But it does seem that there is a camp battle heating up between him and Max Duggan. Of course, I think it's pretty much anybody's game at this point, right? Whoever, turns the most heads and has the most, chemistry with the existing pieces, I think is going to win out. But at this point, I do think there's a real possibility that Max Duggan could overtake Easton Stick as the backup quarterback for the Chargers. I see them as 2 very similar players, but it's going to be one that's interesting to watch because, of course, we've been seeing already some nice highlights between Max Duggan and the TCU wide receivers that might just be enough to give him an edge over Easton Stick to grab that backup quarterback spot going into the future. And I think more than anything in this situation, it might be a money thing too that helps drive the Chargers and its players to outperform one another. All right, so with that out of the way, honorable mentions. There you go. Let's go ahead and get into some of the big names I think a lot of you guys are wondering about in the offseason. We got a couple of players that are good at several positions. They're going to be duking it out for snaps and maybe even a job over the offseason. Let's go ahead and start with one of the big ones. And this was a name that was brought up a lot during the draft, at least during my live stream, as to what's going to happen with the Chargers going forward. And that's because the Chargers finally added to the roster a speedster for themselves in Darius Davis. This first camp battle in the top 5. At number 5 is going to be Jalen Guyton versus Darius Davis. Now, first off, I want to be fair to Jalen Guyton, okay? In all fairness, Jalen Guyton was here first, okay? So I do think there's going to be some, veteran or whatever you call it, favorite. They know the player pretty well by now is what I'm trying to say. Jalen Guyton has a history with the team, the coaches, the quarterback, synchronicity, all that's already kind of known, right? And with that being said, Jalen Guyton is still a very, very good player. I think a lot of us, again, short memory when it comes to players that get injured. Of course, Jalen Guyton did not finish out the year, not even close. And we just, haven't seen a big sample size of him since 2021. Now, at this point, I think Justin Herbert could use as many speedsters as possible. And I do think Jalen Guyton, even with the crowded, wide receiver room, should still be able to make the roster. That being said, there is no guarantee because another man has stepped onto the field, onto the practice field, drafted by the Chargers, probably even reached by showing you how much they wanted this guy on the team, in Darius Davis, who also poses a threat to take that, let's say, a role from a Jalen Guyton as the speedster, the field stretcher, in Darius Davis. And Darius Davis, guys, again, we heard a lot in the offseason from fans and otherwise saying that Darius Davis isn't this crazy huge talent in terms of speed. We've seen a lot of faster guys go through the combine. That's the combine, right? And of course, that's something you can get excited about. And sure, maybe he isn't the fastest wide receiver out there, but he certainly is one of the fastest you'll find on any football team. The guy is very, very quick, as well as recording one of the fastest times recorded in NFL or college football history. I think he clocked somewhere in close to 24 miles an hour. I think the only guy that was faster than him at that point was Cheetah in Tyreek Hill. So that's something, okay? That's something to work with. Is that enough to pose a threat to the existing speed wideout in Jalen Guyton for the Chargers? I mean, yeah, I do think it is. And you got to take, I think the biggest reason that you got to take a look at that is because of how crowded the wide receiver room is all of a sudden, right? Let's go ahead and name off a few. Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, now Quentin Johnston, who is definitely going to be playing a speedy role on the outside, right? Of course, again, not the fastest guy out there, but he knows how to work the deep part of the field. And his acceleration, again, maybe that's why he doesn't have the fastest, 40 time in the world. His acceleration does, elongate a little bit, but the guy, when he reaches top speed, is very, very fast, okay? You got those three. You got Josh Palmer. You got Jalen Guyton. You got Darius Davis. I think you got a couple other backup guys that are coming in competing for snaps that are pretty dang good, right? Like a Pokey Wilson. That definitely gets people very, very excited. Because of how crowded everything is, and because of, I would say, multiple players kind of accomplishing certain roles with the team, let's say Quentin Johnston, Darius Davis, and Jalen Guyton, all kind of those speed options, it could be enough to push out Jalen Guyton. Now, if I'm the Chargers, I'm looking back at Justin Herbert's rookie season where we had Tyron Johnson and Jalen Guyton and say to myself, you know what? You can never have too much speed. You can never have too many speedsters. And if it were me personally, I would at least keep both on the roster. At that point, though, Jalen Guyton and Darius Davis would still be competing for snaps, right? Who's going to be called upon in those situations where the Chargers need to drop the deep bomb, right? The deep ball. And who's going to be called upon in different situations. I think Darius Davis is going to be called upon in a lot more gadget play than Jalen Guyton is. But at the same time, they very much so are going to be competing for snaps. And again, the Chargers and its fans, we've been waiting a long time to see these speedsters duke it out, especially with a big arm cannon kind of like Justin Herbert. That should be very fun and interesting to watch. So at number 5, Jalen Guyton versus Darius Davis. You guys let me know in the comment section below who you think is going to win this battle. Me personally, it's very tough. It's kind of a toss-up. I think Darius Davis, slightly edges it out because he does have a lot of special teams upside as well. But at the same time, you never know. Also, let me know what the other ones that we talked about: Stick versus Duggan, and of course, Dicker versus Hopkins. All right. So with that being said, let's move into number 4. And this is a camp battle I don't know if a lot of people are even talking about right now. A camp battle that maybe is flying under the radar, but makes it still, not even a little less important, right? This is a pretty big deal if you're taking a look at the Chargers defense and how it's constructed right now. This battle is going to be between J.C. Jackson and Asante Samuel Jr. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of people saying, Director, Vato is our number 1 cornerback right now. And I think in a way you are right. He's going to be one of those guys on the outside. The reason I'm comparing him more to Asante Samuel Jr. is because of that flexibility playing on the outside and in the slot. I think that's a big reason why the Chargers brought on J.C. Jackson, is because he was very comfortable doing both. And of course, we do know how important a slot corner is to the Chargers defense in particular. Now, the biggest reason I think this is flying under the radar is because of J.C. Jackson's less than spectacular 2022 season. If you guys want more insight on that and what I think he's going to do in the 2023 season, you can check out my last video talking about J.C. Jackson, the comeback story, okay? That being said, if J.C. Jackson, which right now we're hearing, returns to full health by training camp, and at this point it's actually looking remarkably well, right? Remarkably good. Like, if you were to ask me 6 months ago or whenever the injury took place, I would have said it's probably a stretch to make it to week 1 of the regular season. At this point, his recovery is going well, better than expected from what I'm hearing, okay? And that all of a sudden, at the very surface level, gives us something to be excited about. But then comes the struggle, right? The struggle that we saw from J.C. Jackson last season. This was not the J.C. that was advertised to us as Chargers fans, not the one of the number 1 free agent, acquisitions of the 2022 offseason. He wasn't in any way performing in the way that we thought he would, right? He was getting beat pretty dang bad, and not just from good wide receivers, but some of the backups, like we mentioned in Watson from the Chiefs that last offseason, huge, bomb touchdown, and that just kind of happened over and over and over with J.C. Jackson. That started to make us all question what's going on. Is J.C., fool's gold, falsely advertised? Are we losing faith in the man? I have a feeling a lot of it had to do with things working against him, including the elective surgery that he took last offseason. I think that hindered him. I think the Chargers also brought him back too soon, re-aggravated that healing process or that injury, whatever you want to call it. And then, of course, he did get injured himself. He was also going into a new system that didn't really fit his play style as well as the Patriots did. And I think a lot of that working in, unison really did hamper J.C. Jackson's debut season with the Chargers, okay? Now, that being said, I think if you take a look at another corner in the Chargers roster named Michael Davis, you will have seen a lot of similar struggles. I think in 2020, right? Back when we were all thinking, I think we just gave him the extension. Now we're all wondering, is he a bust in this new system with Brandon Staley, et cetera, et cetera? Well, after a season separated from that struggle, Vato came back with a vengeance, man. This dude really bounced back, and maybe we see a similar narrative with J.C. Jackson this upcoming season. Maybe that one season of struggle was gave him enough of a chip on his shoulder to really tackle this new system, understand his assignments in zone coverage, and maybe just refine what he needs to do to better fit in the Brandon Staley defense to perform as advertised as one of the best free agents last season. I think, again, if you take a look at my last video, a lot of things were working against J.C. Jackson. I think a lot of those will be put behind him, but now comes the camp battle. Who's going to be taking a majority of those, big responsibilities in coverage? It's going to be J.C. Jackson, playing against, let's say, a pretty dominant slot wide receiver, even a guy on the outside. Is he going to be given the bigger assignment, or do the Chargers trust Asante Samuel Jr. more? I think they're going to find a lot of that during training camp. If you guys remember training camp last offseason, J.C. Jackson was absolutely killing it. He looked like the Chargers' unquestioned cornerback 1, and then, of course, the season came, and a lot of things were working against him. I think now that he's got the injury behind him, the Chargers have given him time to really understand where his role is and how he fits. I think we can get back to that in training camp, and then we're going to start understanding, who the Chargers maybe favor a little bit more, J.C. Jackson, Asante Samuel Jr. Either way, you got two pretty spectacular corners, potentially with J.C. Jackson's return. It's a good problem to have, but it would be a fun camp battle to witness, as the Chargers do have some pretty stacked wide receivers to give these guys some stiff competition. All right, let's get into players number 3, or camp battle number 3 for the Chargers. And again, this is another pretty dang important one. And I think this one has been getting a good amount of attention this offseason because of the drama revolving around Austin Ekeler. This camp battle is going to feature Joshua Kelly versus Isaiah Spiller. Now, I don't remember who posted it, my apologies, but I read an article a couple of days ago about the Chargers' most likely breakout candidates of 2023, and surprisingly, they chose one for every team. Surprisingly, the Chargers were assigned Isaiah Spiller for that player elected, not Joshua Kelly, and not any other player on the roster, which is pretty shocking. And I think that goes to speak to how others, even outside the Chargers fan base, viewed an Isaiah Spiller going into his NFL career, right? When he was drafted by the Chargers, us, the fans, and I would say a lot of general NFL fans, understood that he was going into a very good situation. He's a very good player with a pretty high ceiling, considering, what he would be doing in this offense in particular. That never really materialized last season. And a matter of fact, a lot of the opportunities that we saw given to Isaiah Spiller were less than spectacular, but that doesn't mean that he's going to turn out to be a bad player. In retrospect, there was another player that kind of had a similar narrative, and that was indeed Joshua Kelly. You guys remember when he was first drafted out of UCLA? A lot of Chargers fans were less than impressed with some of his production in his rookie season. I think that's just it that we're talking about. It was their rookie seasons, right? Things happen, especially if you're not a first, second, third round pick. You're going to find some struggle. And I feel like the same thing happened to Isaiah Spiller. And I do think these two players are going to have a pretty important future going forward because of the Austin Ekeler situation. If you guys have been living under a rock and you don't know, Austin Ekeler requested a trade earlier this offseason. Of course, that never materialized. It actually ended up in the Chargers giving him a slight bonus to stick around. I'm sure he's going to give it his all, like he's been doing in his entire career with the Chargers. But that does open up a question of what's going on past 2023. Are we going to have an Austin Ekeler? Are the Chargers going to extend him? And to that, I got to tell you guys, I don't know. I hope so. But if I were being honest with you, I don't think Austin Ekeler sticks around. And that just puts a lot more pressure on this whole situation for this particular camp battle. Josh Kelly versus Isaiah Spiller. One of these guys is going to have to step up. Now, as of right now, it is absolutely Josh Kelly's job to lose. He had a fantastic outing last season, really showed a lot of flashes in the pan. It showed to be a pretty capable running back, too. That doesn't mean that Isaiah Spiller isn't coming from it. It doesn't mean that Isaiah Spiller wouldn't have a role either. I think Isaiah Spiller can be your receiving back. Joshua Kelly's kind of, on the ground kind of weapon. But at the same time, somebody's going to have to win this out because I do believe there's going to be responsibilities for both of these guys going into next season. Whether or not the Chargers draft another dude, whether they sign another dude, I think Josh Kelly, Isaiah Spiller are going to be pretty vital going forward. And I think the Chargers know this. And I think the Chargers are going to put both of these guys in situations where they really have to prove themselves. We saw a very similar camp battle last season when it went to the running back position. And I think it's going to be equally as important this season as well. I think the Chargers, they've been trying to fix this running game. They got a brand new offensive coordinator in Kellen Moore, who's going to very much so be emphasizing fixing that run game. Both these guys are going to have to put up or shut up. At this point, I think I would definitely give the edge to Josh Kelly. I think he's developed very nicely, but I also do think there's a sleeping giant element to Isaiah Spiller. I think that there's something there that's very special. I think particularly his involvement in the passing game is going to be something that the Chargers lean on in the future, but I think something's there, and I do think it's going to make for an entertaining camp battle in July. Next up, at number 2, and I think a lot of people could even consider this number 1 if you're talking about job security. At number 2, we're going back to the defense, and this is going to be one that's very, very obvious. It was obvious the day that we drafted this man, Dan Henley. This battle's going to be between Kenneth Murray and Dan Henley, okay? And one of them a first-round pick and the other a third-round pick, if I'm not to be mistaken. It's definitely interesting to see how this position is unfolded for the Chargers. Going into this year, before, all the free agency stuff unfolded, I would have told you that the Chargers starting, linebackers would have been Drew Tranquill and then probably Kenneth Murray. That did not happen. The Chargers, of course, letting go of Drew Tranquill, signing Eric Kendricks, who I think is going to be this team's unquestioned middle linebacker 1. Outside of that, you're going to have another guy that's extremely important to this defense, and it's one that, again, very underrated. That inside linebacker, too, which more often than not gets thrown into coverage, is going to be something I think the Chargers are going to let these guys duke it out for. On one hand, you got a Kenneth Murray who's freakishly athletic. He's got great measurables. The guy, sideline to sideline speed. He's got a pretty good knack at getting to the quarterback and hitting the gap. But he is not extremely consistent, especially when it comes to coverage. The Chargers have really been trying to turn this man into a passable coverage linebacker. He's had his moments, but for the most part has very much so not lived up to those expectations. And that makes me ask, okay, this man, a first-round talent coming into his draft, is it something that the Chargers did wrong in trying to force him to do something that we already knew he struggled with? Or is it something that, Kenneth Murray is supposedly supposed to, level up and get better at in the pros? We'll probably never know. But what we do know is that Daiyan Henley was graded as one of the best coverage linebackers in the draft this season. He has a lot of the same upside as a Kenneth Murray in terms of the speed, the athleticism, the size, the physical attributes. They look pretty good, right? If these were the two starting linebackers, I would say, okay, it doesn't look too bad, and I like the potential of a Daiyan Henley. Now we get into a situation where they're both fighting over one spot, and that's going to be inside linebacker too, because again, Eric Kendricks on question number 1, what do the Chargers want to do with that second position? I think more than likely the Chargers are going to want to go with the man that's probably a little bit better in coverage, because they do ask their linebackers to cover a lot. Eric Kendricks, we already know, is very good at that. Can Kenneth Murray step up in that aspect this offseason? I think he can. Again, we've seen flashes. We've seen him have some moments where he did step up and look pretty good in coverage. Can he do it consistently, though? And on top of that, can he do it better than Daiyan Henley? Because Henley, again, one of the better graded, maybe even one of the best graded, linebackers in coverage in the draft this season. He's going to be a tough cookie. And I do think there's a huge possibility that Henley overtakes a Kenneth Murray, maybe not right away, but by the middle of this season. So if you guys were asking me, I would actually give the edge to Daiyan Henley a little bit, but of course, it being a contract year for Kenneth Murray, it's going to be a season where we do see that extra effort put in, and hopefully he does improve in coverage enough to earn the Chargers' trust with those responsibilities. All right. And to close out this video, my number 1 camp battle, which I think, again, it's a topic we've hit on a lot, but it's one that hasn't seen a lot of movement since we started talking about it, and that's going to be at the safety position. My number 1 battle is going to be between Alohi Gilman, JT Woods, and I'm also going to wedge in there Mark Webb, because we have been hearing a lot of awesome things about him the last couple of seasons. He just hasn't really been healthy enough to show it. But safety, like we've mentioned several times through the offseason, is one of those positions for the Chargers defense in particular that's pretty dang important. And I would hope that the Chargers feel confident, or at least have a plan as to who's going to be taking, or at least filling in that role at safety now that Nasir Adderley has moved on, not just from the Chargers, but from the game of football. This is going to be pretty big, all right? Now, on the plus side, there's a couple of things that I feel pretty confident in. One, Alohi Gilman. I've heard mixed results from different people, whether they like him, whether they dislike him. What my eyeballs tell me as a Chargers fan is that maybe he was a little shaky last season, maybe even a little bit at the top of the season last year as well. But towards the end of the year, I would say even in the middle of the season, we all started to see Alohi Gilman step up, not just as a run support safety, but in coverage as well. And he started to step up so much that I started to feel pretty impressed with his ability to play in lieu of a Derwin James when they had to move him around. I felt pretty confident in his ability to play up top. That opens up a possibility for the Chargers to say, hey, listen, we feel very comfortable in Alohi Gilman. He's going to be our starting free safety this season. That's how confident we are in him. And honestly, if they decide to do that, I don't know if I would fight back too much. I don't think it would be my favorite option, but I also think it's not the worst option. But then you got the competition out there, right? And this is where it kind of gets interesting for the Chargers in the safety position. They got last year's rookie going into the second season, JT Woods, who you're seeing on the right side, who I think was drafted for a very specific reason. And if you guys caught my JC Jackson video, you would have heard me say this. I think the Chargers are trying to build a secondary that is handpicked and built to cause interceptions, to capitalize on interception opportunities. And if you guys take a look at his tape out of college, JT Woods, one of the biggest things he was known for was his ball hawking ability, going up there and generating those interceptions. And I feel like that is something the Chargers are going to want to see up top, right, in coverage for the most part. And that's where I kind of imagined that his role would be in the future. Now, of course, last season, just like at Isaiah Spiller, it didn't really work out that way. A lot of the opportunities that we saw for JT Woods were kind of fumbled away. The tackling was pretty poor. His positioning wasn't great. And his opportunities for interceptions just weren't capitalized on very well. Can that change this season? I think it absolutely can, because he does have some things working for him that Alohi Gilman just simply does not. JT Woods, he's bigger, he's faster, very athletic, and yes, I do think he's got a better knack for going up for picks, really using his body to body out the wide receiver to come down with it. There's some things that he does very well, but it doesn't really matter unless he can fix his positioning, awareness, and coverage ability. And that's something that you can see. We've seen it, right? NFL fans, Chargers fans even, have seen dramatic shifts like that over one season, especially if it's coming from a previous rookie. That is where I want to see some of the biggest competition. How's JT Woods looking? Has he really improved? Is he showing off, not just the speed, but also the ability to understand his assignments and getting position? There are a lot of things that I think JT Woods can improve over one season, and that's why I really want to see this competition start to heat up a little bit. Then there's the X factor in Mark Webb, which you guys, if you're a Chargers fan and you haven't heard about Mark Webb the last 3 seasons, since the Brandon Staley era began, you haven't been paying attention. Mark Webb, free agent. Was he a late round pick? He might have been a late round pick. Either way, an unlikely candidate to come in and steal away the starting safety position. Well, it seems that Brandon Staley loves the man so much. Not only was he giving him snaps at safety, but as well as a slot DB, which is, again, a pretty big responsibility in this particular defense. That's why I think, again, watching the safety battle unfold is going to be very, very important, because it could dictate whether or not the Chargers need to make a drastic move. And I think that drastic move would be investing in the safety position once again. And I think a lot of us know who we would want to see. John Johnson III is definitely a player a lot of us are still rallying for today. But maybe they don't need to do that if they feel confident enough in a Mark Webb, JT Woods, or Alohi Gilman. If I were putting my money on it, I would say the Chargers would likely go into the season with Alohi Gilman as starting safety, and then maybe JT Woods or Mark Webb as your backups. There's also a possibility in my mind that the Chargers start tailoring a JT Woods to play that relief role for Derwin James. That same role that Alohi Gilman's been playing the last several seasons. When you move Derwin James, someone's still got to cover up there. For the longest time, it's been Alohi Gilman. Maybe they're going to start tailoring JT Woods for that position now that maybe Alohi's going to be asked to play more free safety. So we'll have to wait and see. Well, in the comment section below, guys, let me know if there's any other camp battles that I did not mention in today's video that you would like covered, or you would like, a little bit of attention to, as well as some of the ones I did cover in this one. Who do you think's going to win, and what do you think of the competition? How vital do you think, figuring out a position like safety is going to be? And if some of these don't work out, what are some free agents you guys would want to bring in? Of course, we know John Johnson. A lot of you guys were talking about Kareem Hunt and I think Dalvin Cook. I think there's not a bad chance that Dalvin Cook is at least being looked at by the Chargers. Either way, there's some guys out there that the Chargers could sign. So you guys let me know. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This has been The Director. If you guys liked what you saw here, hit us up with a like and sub on your way out. We'll see you next time. And as always, bolt up and stay frosty. I got a pretty good feeling this season about Darius Davis too, guys. I just wanted to mention that before we closed out the video. I think this guy's going to turn some heads and really be one of those camp stars that a lot of people get excited about.